360 Portfolio Insights supports annual and continual planning for portfolios of active and proposed initiatives, products, programs, projects, epics, and other work entities. This starts from the top-down definition of strategies and metrics and drives the intake of tightly aligned innovations. With good governance, you approve the best ideas to proceed forward. Through iterative modeling, you define the costs, benefits, and resource plans for each entity. And once you've modeled enough information for an entity, which can include both active and proposed entities, you can bring it into portfolio scenario what-if analysis, which is what we'll look at now. Here we are inside Portfolio Insights. 100% browser-based, nothing to install to get it up and running. We're going to hit the portfolio analysis here. Each portfolio analysis can be quickly and easily defined with a short little wizard. We're going to hit our 3-year plan here. The 3-year plan models a continual planning cycle. As this portfolio loads up, it's loading up the real-time data, which can include integration to systems like Microsoft Project Online, Jira, and Azure DevOps, where you actively plan and control the tasks and assignments on a project. Here we find in our portfolio, we've got 32 entities with a budget of approximately $30 million, and the payback is going to be 1 year and 9 months. This report card that we get at the outset is a set of cards that are defined based on the information we're bringing into this portfolio. The report card on its own is interesting, but it doesn't really tell us much yet. So we go to the second step, which is the optimization view. In the optimization view, we find our list of 32 entities, and these entities are all currently in our roadmap. In our scenario that we're talking to here today, these are active pieces of work that are ongoing. Here in our optimization view, we have a few things going on. First of all, we're dealing with a hub. And in a hub, what that means is I can grab the information that's in here and move it around to suit my purpose. The next thing you'll see is we're showing a value score and a yield score. The value score is based on our value drivers. So at the outset, when you're modeling your entity, you're going to score things like the strategy, the risk, plan benefits, and other elements. For active entities, you may be doing things like scoring the health of the entity, and all of those can fit into your value drivers. So something that might happen with the value drivers here is that your executive might come along and say, well, we were focused on our strategic score and that had the highest weight, but now we've changed our focus and we're focused on the risk. And so we can come into the weighting here and change the weighting. So we change the relative weighting. Portfolio Insights looks after the normalized weighting. When we click the check mark here, this list in the background is going to sort a little differently based on the changed value drivers. So our knee and elbow pads were number 4 before, now knee and elbow pads are number 3. So we've got our value drivers and we've got our yield here. The yield is based on a calculation based on the value drivers and the total benefits for each entity. We can sort these entities by the value or by the yield. So what else can happen with your portfolio? The next thing that can happen is that your executive can come along and say, we know we said we were going to invest roughly $30 million into this portfolio, but now we only have $22 million available to us. So we come in here and start doing some what-if analysis. We put in our $22 million and we hit recalculate. And when we do that, what Portfolio Insights does is it uses the value score to find your best bang for the buck. So as we come down through this list, we can find automated software installation is maybe excluded. And this may be excluded and may be included are based on a constraint tolerance up here of 10%. So this is excluded from our portfolio currently, as are all of these other entities. Now, some of these entities may be important. There may be some things in this list that must be done, maybe, for example, for a regulatory purpose. We'll pick on the audit database here and say this needs to be done for a regulatory purpose. So we're going to include it. It'll go green now. The other thing that's happened up here is our committed cost, our budget has gone up. So we're going to come back down here and we're going to say, no matter what, we're always going to include this. So even if we drop our budget down to the cost for this project, it will be included. So we'll lock the optimization status. So what else can happen with your portfolio? Well, we're doing continual planning here. So the next thing that can happen is we'll have ideas come up through the course of the execution of all of these projects. So we can come up here to our idea backlog. So these are entities that have been modeled to the point where we're ready to make a selection on them. And I can grab these entities and drop them over here on our existing portfolio. And we'll see a couple of these show up in a moment as blue lines. There's one. That's probably enough. We'll stop there. As we've done that, each time we've pulled one of those entities in, our committed cost has gone up. So now we're at a $32.9 million budget, roughly. So we've only got $22 million. We can see these are our backlog. These are the ones that are currently in our roadmap. And what we're going to do here is we're going to hit recalculate again. So Portfolio Insights comes back and says, these ideas that were in our backlog should be included in our portfolio. These ones that are in our roadmap should be maybe included. These ones should be maybe excluded. As we go down a little bit further, we find the audit database that we locked in is still there. So what's happening when we do this? We're not actively going down to the currency translator upgrade team and going, everybody clear out, we're done. What we're doing is scenario analysis. So we're creating scenarios that we can save and that we can quickly get back to when we're ready to look at those. For example, if we're in an executive meeting and we're presenting the new portfolio, we can jump back and forth between portfolios really quickly to show them what's changed on these various portfolios. As we do changes in our budget cutoff here and in the different entities that are in and out of our portfolio, that updates in our other views, our metrics, our optimization, and our plan. Let's increase our budget here. And now what we've done is we've included everything in our portfolio. If we go over to our portfolio metrics view, we see we now have 39 entities. We're up 7 entities from where we started, and we're at about a $40 million budget, which is up about $9.5 million from where we were before. Our payback has also gone up. It's a little bit longer now. There's more that we can learn from our portfolio, so we'll go to our plan. The plan is reflected as a Gantt chart style view of all the work that we're going to do. In here, we can see each project represented as a line, and on that line, we may have the milestones and the state of each of those milestones. We can define how we want our roadmap to look. For example, we're currently grouping our entities by our related metrics. Maybe we want to look at those by department, or maybe we want to look at them by location. We'll go back to our related metrics for now. We can also color things by different indicators, so location, department, and so on. And we can do things like turning our milestones on and off and the dependencies, and we can also enforce our milestone dependencies. Let's look at one of those milestone dependencies. So here we have an entity and it's related to something. Let's look at that relationship. I can filter down just on the related entities. What we can see here is that we've got a broken relationship. This milestone should happen before this one. It's an interactive roadmap. So I can grab this entity and I can move it over here to the right. And at the point where we pass that relationship and it gets fixed, it will turn from red to black. And now that it's black, as I move this entity, it will pull the two in concert. Okay, same if I move the bottom one. Let's show all of the entities again. The next thing we can do is we can look at the impact on resources. So here are all our resources. They're organized by role, and I can open each of the roles up and we can see the individual people who are doing the work. In the short term, I can see the allocation of these people where, for example, AppTap here is heavily underallocated and his peers are heavily overallocated. And I can solve some of that in the near term by reassigning work. In the long term, when I start to look at different roles, so perhaps the project manager here, and I can see this project manager role is heavily overallocated into the future. If I want to solve for that, I simply click on one of the crosshairs here. And what that does when we do that is it contextually filters for the work that involves the project manager. Now to solve for this, what we're going to do is we're going to try and move some of this work to the right. And as we move it, you can see the numbers moving on the project manager. And you'll continue to move these until you solve the problem of the overallocation. Now, in some cases, you're never going to actually solve that problem because you literally may just not have enough people to do this work. So then you enter a set of choices. Do you, for example, start to cancel some of this work? Do you move it all out? Or do you need to go hire people to do the work? And what you would do is look and say, here's a long-term problem. We need to maybe hire people for that. Here's a short-term problem, and maybe we cross-train people for that. The next thing you might want to look at is what are the impacts on the costs. So this reflects the budget for the entire portfolio across time. What we can see is that we're heavily front-end weighted on our costs at this point. And our finance team may not support that because they want to be able to have a predictable cash flow. So again, you would click on one of these crosshairs. It'll contextually filter for just the work that's being done in that quarter, and we'll move things over. And we can start to move our costs out into the future by doing this. And we may not end up with the perfect model, but over the course of time and some moving of these different entities, we'll get a better looking model. Of course, by balancing your resources and costs by moving work out into the future, you're also impacting your benefits. If we look here at this model, we're looking at the point that our costs and our benefits, we're looking at the point where our costs and our benefits cross. And over here on the right-hand side where it's green, this is where we're getting benefits. On the left-hand side where it's red, we're in a net cost situation. So now if we grab these entities and move them over to the left, we'll see that we start to move our benefits earlier. As you're doing this, once again, you're creating scenarios, and you can save these scenarios as you go, and you can get back to the scenarios quickly for comparisons. But you may also want to look at reports that show you easily all of the scenarios at the same time. Here we are back at the home page of Portfolio Insights, and we'll look at our analytics. Under the analytics, we have the scenario comparison report. Here in the scenario comparison report, we start to see the different scenarios that have been created. Here's our baseline, and here's scenarios A, B, C, and D. We can see that we've got a number of entities selected in and out of each portfolio. We can see what the budget utilization is, our payback, our return on investment, and so on. As we come down a little further, we can look at this comparison graph that shows us the cost and value. Here what we see is each of these 5 scenarios have roughly the same value. If we hover over these, we get a pop-up that shows us the metrics for each scenario. What can we learn from this? Well, here we have all approximately the same value, but this one on the left-hand side has a much lower cost. So what's going on in this? If we right-click on this, we can drill through to the scenario summary. And now we get this other report that starts to show us the specifics for just the scenario. In here, we can see the strategic metric contribution. We can see how the benefits come out of this portfolio. And down at the bottom here, we can start to see what's included and excluded in the portfolio and what's changed. We can also see the staffing that we'll need for this particular portfolio. Let's go back up to the full scenario analysis. If we were still in the mode of creating more scenarios, we could come down and use this table to help guide us in creating perhaps a scenario E. So if we look at this chart of everything that's in and out, we look at AI integration, for example. It was originally in our backlog, and in each scenario that we created, it was included. So if I was creating a scenario E, maybe I would just start by adding in AI integration. However, in comparison, the customer service feedback portal, which was originally included, has been excluded or may be excluded from every other scenario. So perhaps we create a scenario E where we drop it. Reflecting on what we just looked at, 360 Portfolio Insights helps your executive stakeholders and portfolio management team make good decisions fast. The portfolio analysis solution can be used in multiple ways and supports annual planning, continual planning, and selections. Finally, the portfolio scenario what-if analysis is fully configurable to meet your needs. This drives business agility through enabling your management team to use your strategy and the best information you have to easily adapt to market forces and outside factors so that your portfolio investments help to drive improved business performance. Thanks for allowing us to spend a little time talking about our 360 Portfolio Insights solution. The true magic comes when we have a deeper understanding of your needs and compare that with the right North Highland experience.